Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1056, 1056, February the 27th, 2020, Thursday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, let's go ahead and get to the news of the day. We have a lot to talk about. First of all, let's get this out of the way. The Democratic debate from last night in South Carolina. As you know, I cannot stand watching the Democratic debates. I don't think I ever learned anything new. But of course, I do comment on it, so I'll go back and watch the highlights the next day. And of course read some reviews from both sides of the aisle. And the debate in South Carolina was no different in general than all the debates so far. There have been, 15, 16 debates, and in every single one of them, President Trump has been declared the winner. That's not just by right-wing pundits, that's by even left-wing. I mean, MSNBC, the Commie News Network, the New York Times, the Washington Post, you name it. Daily Beast, even the ones on the radical left, have described almost all of these debates as being dumpster fires, train wrecks, whatever you want to call them. They're all disasters. And the problem with it is that there are simply no strong candidates in the field. So you can't have good debates when all the contestants are basically substandard. And this was the case again in South Carolina. So again, Trump was the big winner in the South Carolina debate. And I think probably one of the biggest losers, if not the biggest loser in the debate, was the actual moderators. The moderators in the last two debates, and especially last night, just completely lost control of the debate. They could not control the bickering going back and forth, and so it looks bad. I mean, the optics are bad. You even had the Hollywood leftist tweeting out their comments about how bad it was. It looked like a bunch of school children fighting over a cookie. And so this is all they've got. I mean, it's a weak field. So you can't expect that you're going to have good debates when you have a bunch of people who are just not up to the job. I always thought when I looked at this field from the very beginning that with the exception of Burisma Joe, I really looked at everyone in the field as being people who were running for vice president. I never thought Klobuchar or Warren or Buttigieg or any of these people actually were seriously thinking that they would be the nominee. I think these people were all running for vice president. Biden is the only one that really had the stature and the history, the background, the resume, that he could stand there and be taken seriously as a presidential nominee for the Democrats. But the problem with him is he's just so old. His mind is failing him. He makes a lot of gaffes. He's never been a good politician. He doesn't really connect with people. He doesn't generate a lot of enthusiasm. All of the things, he has no real cohesive message. He's just kind of all over the place. And so even though he had the credentials, he doesn't have the right stuff to be a presidential candidate. And especially when you're going up against a figure like President Trump, who's big on charisma, brings a lot of enthusiasm, has a great sense of humor, is a great counterpuncher. He can think on his feet. He doesn't need a script. He doesn't have to memorize things. He doesn't have to practice and have debate coaches. He doesn't do any of that stuff. I mean, he just shows up. He doesn't need to memorize a bunch of stuff and talking points because he's not worried about what he's going to say, who he's going to offend. He just says what he thinks and what he believes. And when you can go out and say what you think and what you really believe, you don't have to worry about being tripped up. And if you don't give a damn about offending people, and Trump clearly doesn't, then you don't have to worry about it. You can just go out and be yourself. And that's why he is such a difficult opponent. And we saw that back in 2016. He won all the debates against the Reverend Clinton. And you could see that she was very careful. You could see that she was very selective of her words. You could see that before she ever answered any questions, she stopped for a moment, let it kind of go through her mind what talking point was, almost like she had a Rolodex in her head that said, okay, if you ask this question, you go to this Rolodex card, and this is what you say. Very scripted, whereas Trump was able just to roll and flow. And also, he's very good at being, he's very good at getting under the skin of his opponent. The way he kind of, his presence on the stage, he's a fairly large individual, pretty big man. He has a kind of a commanding presence. And of course he cuts, he was doing it to Hillary the whole time. She would say something, he'd say, well, that's not true, no, whatever. So he was constantly, he doesn't let things go. If his opponent says something and he doesn't like what they said, he comments on it. Even if it's just a quick comment. So he really agitates and irritates and gets under the skin of his opponent. So whoever takes on Trump has to be someone with a really good temperament, and someone who's pretty thick-skinned, and someone who understands that he's not a normal politician, and you better be very careful what you say. And if he takes anything you say as personal, you better believe he's coming back at you twice as hard. So he's a very difficult person to debate. All those Republicans found out in the primaries when he won all those debates too. And so there really is no one in the Democratic field, no one on the stage last night that can hold a candle to Trump. The Democrats know this. As I've said in videos, as I've been saying for weeks and weeks, the Democrats know they're not going to beat Trump in 2020. That's why they tried to impeach him and get rid of him some other way. They're just trying to hold on to the Congress. They're just trying to put someone in there that doesn't hurt the down ballot. And that's what they're looking for, the person who will do the least amount of harm to the down ballot. That's what the Democrats are looking for. And of course, Commie Bernie is the worst person they could put in there, because he will do great damage to the down ballot, not just in federal elections in the Congress, but as well that will carry over into state elections, local elections. It could be a landslide of biblical proportions if they put Commie Bernie in, and that's why they're trying to stop him. But the answer is not Michael Bloomberg. Bloomberg is in a lot of ways, radical as well. Maybe not radical to the extent of Commie Bernie, but no one's really calling him out on his record in New York, because most of the people on the stage have no problem with the things he did in New York. He came in and he maintained a lot of the same programs that Giuliani put in place. And but a lot of those programs were Giuliani's programs. It was Giuliani who turned New York around. Bloomberg came in and he carried on with the policies, mostly the Giuliani. And then the things he did that were his stuff was all the social stuff, trying to ban soft drinks, the big gulp, trying to cut down on certain types of ban certain types of salt, butter, various other things that you could use to prepare food in restaurants in New York. All these bans and all this social engineering is really what Bloomberg did on his own. Everything else is pretty much stuff that Giuliani had put in place, and Bloomberg simply assumed those programs and continued them. So again, it was just another typical bad night for the demo commies, and Trump wins and they lose again. As far as individual performances, I thought that Bloomberg did, I thought, quite a bit better. He understands that you can't stand there like a piñata and get beat to death. So that certainly he did better there. He responded much quicker, and it looks like to me also, just as I predicted on yesterday's video, that they backed off of him. The only one that really seemed to really hit Bloomberg hard again was, as I predicted, Hiawatha. Hiawatha just despises Bloomberg, and she did continue to get her digs into him. But everyone else seemed to back off a little bit, and they didn't hit Bloomberg nearly as hard as they did the previous week. And so he didn't have nearly the difficulty this past debate as he did the previous one. But I think he did better. But I still think he's a very weak candidate, and I still think he has a big problem just because of the way he's trying to go about this. And I don't think it's going to resonate. I just don't think he'll do very well. And I do believe, as I said in yesterday's video, that ultimately, I do believe that he and Bernie will end up at the finish line together. And I believe in the process of getting there, both Bloomberg and Commie Bernie will beat each other to death. And they'll get a lot of help from their allies in the media. They'll get a lot of help from a lot of places. But by the time Bernie and Bloomberg show up to the convention, they're both going to be fairly beat, bruised, and bloodied. And both of them will be severely weakened. And I think too weak for either of them to generate the enthusiasm that you need and the support you need to clearly win the nomination. That's why I continue to say that they're almost going to be forced to bring in somebody to be kind of the center, someone they can put sort of in the middle of Bloomberg and Commie Bernie, and it will have to be someone that's probably not currently on the stage, someone with national appeal, national name recognition, someone with the organization already in place, someone with the ability to raise a lot of money, and I believe that person is the rotten Reverend Clinton. I've been consistent on that for a very long time, and until I'm proven wrong, I'll continue to say the same. So that's kind of how I see the debate last night. Bernie, I thought he had a pretty poor night. Of course, he was getting beat on. He was definitely the guy that they were going after last night. I don't think he did a very good job of defending his positions. I think he needed to walk back some things, and he didn't do it. He doubled and tripled down on it. And he also just didn't look like he had very much energy last night. And he looked like he wasn't maybe feeling very well. He just didn't. He wasn't quite as sparky as he normally is. He just didn't look like to me that he looked like he was feeling well, and he seemed to struggle. He was getting beat on quite a bit. I don't think it hurt him with his base at all. His base totally gets him, but I believe it could have hurt him with some independents and maybe some more moderate Democrats. But I think that those people are still undecided and unhappy. I think a lot of them people, moderate Democrats and independents, have already probably made the decision that there's nobody on that stage that they can vote for, and then I think that Trump is going to get quite a bit of those voters. So that's my assessment of what happened last night. Anyone else that was on the stage, there's really no need to comment on them because they simply, don't matter at this point. It's pretty much Bloomberg and Bernie. Now, in the vote in South Carolina, Bloomberg will not be on the ballot, and the fact that Biden didn't have a terrible night, didn't have a great night, but for Biden it wasn't bad. It could have been a lot worse. But he did assert himself a couple times, and he didn't have a bad night. But because Bloomberg's not on the ballot, I think that you're still going to see Bernie or Biden finish one or two, first or second. The two of them will finish first and second. I'm not sure which one will win. I think they'll be fairly close, though. I don't expect either of them to win by a large margin. I think it will be 5 points or less between Bernie and Biden at first and second. And I believe that Steyer will probably take third, only because he's pinned all of his hopes and dreams on South Carolina. He's dropped $30 million. And he's running an ad there really pushing reparations for blacks. And, of course, he's just, pounding the advertising markets, not just on the internet, but on TV, on radio. He's hitting it really hard. And it's probably not a bad strategy for Steyer, really. Coming into Super Tuesday to finish third would give him a boost, and that's probably a good strategy for him. However, again, I just don't think he's someone that's going to be there at the end. But I think it will give him a boost going into Super Tuesday, and I do believe that he's likely going to be the third place finisher in South Carolina. So I think either Biden or Bernie will finish 1 and 2, and then I think Steyer will finish third, and the rest of the field, again, I don't think it matters. Now let's move on to some other news. Well, we have Pelosi Galore. Pelosi Galore asked about who she would support, and she's pretty much giving the pat line that all the elitist Democrats, Democrat leaders at this point are giving, which is that we will embrace the nominee. And she said we will embrace the nominee enthusiastically. Now, you can take something away from that. I mean, what I take away from that is that we will embrace the nominee. I think that's like code. I think the Democrats already have a plan to make sure that Bernie does not get the nomination, that they're going to cheat him one way or another, take it away from him at the convention, however they're going to do it. So, of course, they're going to endorse the nominee because I think in their mind, the elitist and the Democratic Party and the big donors have already decided they simply are not going to allow Bernie to be the nominee. Therefore, they're perfectly happy saying they're going to endorse the nominee. Remember, arriving at the convention without the majority of delegates means that you're just, you haven't clinched it, and you're not the nominee. They will have to have a vote, then they will have to have a second vote. That's when the superdelegates chime in, at which point on the second vote at a brokered convention, they can nominate anyone, even if they've never participated in the debate, even if they've never registered, even if they've never been in a primary, a caucus, whatever. They can write in, Moby Dick. It doesn't matter. Anybody, they can write in. And I think that's how the Right Reverend Clinton is going to try to rig it. I'm pretty convinced that they're going to screw Bernie. I will be surprised if they embrace Bernie Sanders enthusiastically as the nominee, knowing good and well he will cost them both houses of Congress. They'll cost him. They'll lose governorships. They'll lose state houses. They'll lose local elections. It will be devastating. So for all these Democrat elitists to come out and say that they're going to endorse or embrace the nominee, I think that's code for the fact that they've already decided they are going to make sure that Commie Bernie does not get the nomination. That's how I read that. Maybe you guys read it differently. That's okay. Well, we have President Trump saying that we have President Trump suing the New York Times. Absolutely, it's about time. Trump is going to sue. Well, it's actually the Trump campaign is going to sue the New York Times over the article that they published, claiming that the Trump campaign had an overarching deal with Vladimir Putin, and that Russia was helping Trump to defeat the rotten Reverend Clinton in exchange for a pro-Russian foreign policy. This article was written back in March of 2019. And this was one of the original articles, and from there, everything that we've seen since that time has been just a piggyback off that original article, which continues to be referenced time and time again as we continue. And now they're even adding on. Now it's not just 2019. Now or 2016. Now they're using the same garbage to try to float the same narrative to use it in 2020. And at some point, you got to find a way to put a stop to it. The media will not police themselves. The Federal Communications Commission is obviously asleep at the wheel. They seem to have no interest. The Federal Election Commission doesn't seem to have a problem with it. You're not seeing any cautions or warnings or fines or anything like that that you would normally expect to see when you see this type of straight-up slander. So at this time, I think the Trump administration, the Trump campaign is fed up. They're sick of it because they know it's not going to stop. And the lies will just keep coming, and they'll be getting larger and larger. And you got Michael Bloomberg out there with willing to spend $2 billion. He'll be blanketing the airwaves with this kind of garbage. He made exactly that comment in the debate in South Carolina about Trump working with the Russians. And at this point, you just got to put a stop to it. So I think it's a very good move. It's a rare thing, but I think it has to happen. We're living in a different age than we've been living in the past. And so I think it's a very good move by the Trump campaign to file this libel suit against the New York Times. And we know that they cannot back up anything. In fact, the Mueller report and the IG report together contradict everything in this article. They have no evidence to prove anything, the claims that they're making, the narrative that they're pushing. I expect that the New York Times will be probably settling out of court, paying the Trump campaign a substantial amount of money, and they'll probably have to come out with a front page story issuing a retraction to the claims that they've been making, which are totally false. So I think it's an excellent move. Support it 100%. Okay, so Trump just keeps on winning, and I know none of you are tired of winning yet. We want the big win. We want the big win. We want to put all the criminals who tried to carry out the coup in prison. Once I see the criminals in prison, maybe I'll take a break from some winning. But for now, I want to keep winning. Now, here's a big win. This is a big, big win right here. A federal appeals court has now ruled in favor of the Trump administration, allowing the administration to withhold millions of dollars in law enforcement grants from sanctuary cities, specifically when they refuse to work with federal ICE agents. So this is the second big ruling Trump's had in the last week. The previous big ruling came when they allowed his immigration policy to go forward, and now you have this ruling. So this is two big victories in the courts that Trump has had. Not to mention, we just learned yesterday that the Ninth Circuit Court is now, Trump is now taking control of that. The majority of the Ninth Circuit Court is now conservative. So a huge win there. And this should have been a no-brainer. And I mean, this is something that's been done over and over and over again. Just like I remember here in Ohio, when they tried to pass the seatbelt law back 20 years ago or so, and the state of Ohio did not want to have to comply, and the federal government went to court against the state of Ohio, with the state of Ohio, to basically because the federal government said, okay, if you do not comply with the federal seatbelt law, we're going to withhold funds for infrastructure funds, highway, roads, and bridges, and things like that. So Ohio and the federal government went to court, and the federal government won. Ohio lost, and we had to have the seatbelt laws. The same thing happened prior to that with the helmet law, but we won that case. So in the state of Ohio, if you ride a motorcycle, you do have to wear eye protection, but you do not have to wear a helmet. And now there may be some rule in there. It's been a while. I sold my motorcycle years ago, but back when I had my motorcycle, if you were under 18, I think, maybe been 21 or 18, I can't remember, but you did have to wear a helmet. But if you're over either 18 or 21, you did not have to wear a helmet, but you do have to wear eye protection. So these types of cases with the federal government issuing a federal law, state doesn't want to comply, they go to court, and most of the time the federal government wins, and the ruling is usually yes. If they're threatening to withhold funds, the federal government has the right to withhold funds from you if you don't follow a federal law. And so this didn't surprise me that this ruling went this way. But the important thing about these last 2 or 3 rulings that Trump has had is it shows that the courts are finally coming to the realization that you cannot have these leftist activist judges constantly blocking Trump's policies. He'll come up with a policy, he'll put it in place, and some federal judge, liberal judge, will go block it, and it blocks it for the entire country. Just one state, it can be California, will block the policy, and the entire country is affected by it, whether it's on immigration, sanctuary cities, whatever it is. And so we can see now that there's kind of a turning happening here because the courts are realizing, and this is actually going all the way to the Supreme Court, is where these are being decided, which is that, you can't have, activist judges blocking the president's policies that he's been elected to put in place. You may not like them, you may not agree with them, but you can't just have these liberal federal judges blocking the president's ability to carry out his policies, and that he has the constitutional authority to put in place. And so it's much more than just these 2 cases. There's a bigger issue, and that is the issue. And now we can finally see, after 3 years of Trump having to battle in the courts for every single thing he does, we're now seeing it's being flipped, and it's becoming obvious to these federal judges, these activist judges, that they're not going to win these cases anymore. They're going to be shot down, and shot down very quickly. And so that's the most important thing to take away from these rulings. Well, let's go ahead and have our daily Burisma Joe Biden gaffe update, because there's always, every day there are Biden gaffes, and we don't want to miss any of them. They're so good. Okay, so we finally had the Burisma Joe's campaign now has had to finally come out, and after being forced, they finally had to come out and admit that Biden was never arrested while trying to visit Nelson Mandela in South Africa. His campaign has been forced to come out and admit that was a lie. We also had him yesterday, or last night, in the debate where he was talking about gun control, patting himself on the back for all his hard work with gun control, which will cost him 33 to 36 states if he were nominated. And he's saying that the 150 million people have been killed by gun violence since 2007. Of course, another major gaffe. Of course, no one on the panel called him on that. They let him get away with it. But that would be about half the people in the country would be dead since 2007 due to gun violence. Of course, this is ridiculous, nonsense, and just more bullshit from Burisma Joe, but he doesn't know any better. In fact, just to prove he doesn't know any better, he actually said yesterday in another speech he was given, he says, quote, "Sometimes I wake up and I think it's 1920, not 2020. Now, if Buttigieg would have said that, or someone else might have said that, people wouldn't have thought much about it. But that's probably not the type of thing that Burisma Joe should be saying, because it kind of goes along with what everyone's talking about with Burisma Joe, which is that he's lost his mind. This doesn't help. I mean, this guy just, I've never seen anyone quite like him. The fact that he's still considered a very likely choice to be the Democratic nominee, and he might end up being the Democratic nominee. They might try to roll out the rotten Reverend Clinton and write her in, but they may find out when they attempt to do that there's so much pushback against it that it may not fly, and they may be forced to turn back to Burisma Joe and overrule the delegate count, put the super delegates in for quid pro quo Joe, and push him over the top over Bernie. It'll create a lot of chaos, a lot of problems, but I guess it's better than having Bernie at the top of the ticket. But that's why they may be trying to help quid pro quo Joe and make sure he sticks around. Well, again, Project Veritas, they teased the day before. Well, yesterday they came out and they actually showed the first video. I don't know if there's more to come, but at least they showed this video. It's very damning. Of course, this time they get an ABC correspondent, David Wright, on hidden camera, admitting that his bosses at ABC spike important stories. He admits that they do not cover Trump fairly. He admits that ABC and the other big networks are out of touch with middle America. He admits that he personally is a socialist. And of course, ABC, once this video came out, it didn't take him hardly any time at all to suspend this correspondent, David Wright. He's now suspended at ABC, and they're saying that when his suspension is over and he comes back, he will not be covering politics, which is what he covers. Essentially, he's being forced out at ABC because of the comments he made that were very critical of management at ABC. All he did was tell the truth on hidden camera. Well done, Project Veritas. Breitbart is reporting that a house cleaning is coming to the Pentagon. In fact, it's already underway. And basically the word is either you are on the Trump team or you're out. You're on the Trump team or you're out at the Pentagon. This is happening right now as we speak. They're going to clean the house. About time. Man, the first guy they should get rid of at the Pentagon is the damn accountant. Every year we hear a story that comes out, well, the Pentagon can't account for $100 billion or $500 billion or however much it is. I remember on 9/11, we find out that they couldn't account for like close to $1 trillion. I mean, where's all that money going? Well, it's going in somebody's pocket. That's where it's going. The first guy I would fire at the Pentagon is the accountant. Holy smoke. Well, we, last night at the debate, getting back to that for just a moment, there was a couple times when Bernie got booed, which is something you don't see too much of, but he got booed, and Bloomberg actually was getting some applause. And I thought that was kind of strange, because it's not something we've seen in the debates up until now, but we found out that last night, in order to get into that event, to be part of the live audience at the ABC debate, that you had to pay $1,750 for a ticket to get to that event. So, yeah, it's $1,750 a ticket. Probably not a lot of Bernie bros there. It was probably loaded with Bloomberg's people, and he probably paid for all their tickets. Well, we have Paul Sperry reporting that Uncle Bob the Executioner interviewed Joseph Misfit on February the 10th of 2017. That's well documented. It's on my timeline. But he's now pointing out that there have been requests for the 302, or for even as it relates to the citation in the IG report, IG Huckleberry Horowitz's report, that there doesn't appear to be a 302. There's no 302 for the meeting that they had with Misfit. It appears to be missing or never existed. Why do you think that is? He was working for them. He's working for the FBI. We know that now. So why didn't anyone hit Bernie on his being an atheist? They ask him about being Jewish, but have you noticed that the one thing that they've never hit Bernie on is the fact that he's an atheist? And why is that? Well, it's because most Democrats are atheists. That's why they won't hit Bernie on as being an atheist. But don't worry, Trump will take care of that. You better believe it. As soon as if Bernie becomes a nominee, within, I would say, 48 hours, Trump will be letting all the world know that Bernie is an atheist. And that really will hurt him with Democrats, because it's hard to believe. I don't know how he can be a Democrat and a Christian, or even a practicing Jew or Catholic or what have you. But there's a lot of Democrats that identify themselves as believing in God and being religious. And a lot of black and Hispanic voters consider themselves to be Christian. So, once they find out that Bernie, he may be a Jewish guy, but he ain't a religious guy, he is in fact an atheist. That will not help him with the religious crowd. There's another large block of voters, including a lot of Democrats, that he will lose to Trump. We also know that Commie Bernie is very much opposed to religious charities. He's made that perfectly clear. And here's something else. Have you noticed throughout these last few debates, in fact, practically all of them, when you think about it, there's not very much talk about abortion, the New Green Deal, climate change, reparations for slavery, open borders, sanctuary cities. These are all major issues supported by demo-commies that they don't seem to want to talk about in the debates. Now, they may think that they're helping the demo-commie candidates by keeping these issues behind the curtain. But it's not going to work, because as soon as the general election begins and the Democrats name their nominee, you can bet that President Trump is going to make issues like abortion, the Green Deal, climate change, reparations, open borders, sanctuary cities, and all these other things. Trump's going to make absolutely sure that these issues rise to the very top of the agenda. He doesn't have to worry about going out and fighting too much for the economy, because those things speak for themselves. Of course, they'll be trying to launch personal attacks on him, and they'll be trying to rekindle the Trump-Russia collusion delusion. None of that stuff's going to stick. But what is going to stick is when Trump starts talking about their positions on abortions, open borders, the New Green Deal, and all the other things. So they're not helping the demo-commies by not bringing these things up now. These things are going to be aired out. They are going to be vetted out by President Trump. And whether the fake news media wants to ask these questions in debates or not, Trump doesn't rely on them. He's got Twitter, and he'll make damn sure everybody knows the Democratic nominee's position on all of these issues that they really don't want to talk about. Well, we have Blago going on, I believe, Tucker Carlson, and saying that he has more bombshells on Barack Hussein Obama. And he says they are coming, in addition to what he's already told us. And he's been naming names, specifically. So what's going on here? Well, two things. First of all, Blago better be careful. I mean, these are people he's dealing with who will arrange for you to have an accident. Ask Mr. Haney. Ask Seth Rich. Ask some other people who've crossed the paths of these goons. They have no problem with arranging an accident for you when you put them in jeopardy. So he better be careful with what he's doing here. And there's another thing that sort of jumps out at me, and that is that he's obviously looking for a book deal. So Blago's definitely looking for a book deal, and he may have some dirt to drop on Obama. Well, he might as well get ready to pile on, because when Mr. Durham comes out and explains what happened in 2016 and even going back to 2012, Obama, it may not take anything from Blago to destroy his legacy and likely result in his impeachment. Finally, last but not least, another hit piece on John Durham in the Washington Post. And again, this is another theme that they're coming back to, which we've seen before, was that they're now suggesting that the Durham investigation could tarnish his fantastic reputation that he's built up over the years. This is an attempt to get Durham to think, oh, do I really want to mess up my reputation? Well, you know what? Durham is quite aware, as is A.G. Barr, about the politics of this and everything that goes along with it. They know all that, and they know how it's going to affect their reputation. I'm sure they've considered it. But I think they may be looking at this in a different way than Durham and Barr look at it. I think Durham and Barr look at it as being the guys who were courageous enough to stand up and call out the deep state and to drain the swamp and to be truth tellers. I think that that's how they see that they'll be remembered, not as being guys who, by exposing the crimes, tarnish their reputation. So I think the Washington Post is wrong. We'll have to wait and see. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See ya. Bye.